Welcome to the Dog Friendly Doggy Podcast this week, which is in association with Dog Friendly Magazine and with myself, James Walters, and Dog Friendly founder Steve Bennett.
The Doggy Podcast with Steve and James.
Today, we're delighted to have Lottie Gross on the podcast. Lottie is the quintessential dog friendly traveller, a travel writer whose Manchester Terrier Arty accompanies her on her breaks, and she's written many publications, including for the Daily Telegraph and the Times, and she's written 2 books about taking your dogs on holiday. These are Dog Friendly Weekends and Dog Days Out. Today, though, we're very excited to be talking to her about her latest trip, which has been about Europe, which she's taken Arty around with her. And this has also been featured in the Dog Friendly magazine. Before we catch up with Lottie, Steve, have you taken your dog on holiday to Europe?
No, I haven't actually, but do you know there are so many wonderful places in the UK that I haven't been yet, that Europe really hasn't been on my radar, but that's probably actually because I don't know how to take Charlie and Angel into Europe. So if I understood perhaps how to do that and also how dog friendly the continent is, yeah, I think I'd love to have a go, but I'd need someone to point me in the right direction.
And we know, of course, that things changed a little bit with Brexit. So you now have to get an animal certificate instead of a pet passport, and that has to be renewed yearly. So it is quite different. So I think that's one of the things that I know for a dog friendly review for the magazine, somebody invited us to Belgium. And at the time, we were just getting over the pandemic. And there was the thing, we've got to get this animal certificate.
For the benefit of our listeners, James, I think it'd be worth mentioning 2 websites that are very, very useful if you're looking to take your dogs into Europe. Because you're quite right, you will need an animal health certificate since Brexit. And to find out how to do this, we recommend the government website, www.gov.uk/taking your pet abroad. And there are hyphens in between each of those words. So www.gov.uk/taking-your-pet-abroad. And they'll give you all the information that is required. Also, a very useful website, which is the Le Shuttle website. So what was Eurotunnel. Recommend you visit their website, www.leshuttle.com, and search for pet travel requirements. And you'll find some really helpful information there as well.
We haven't been ourselves, but I'm hoping today, I'm sure Lottie is going to inspire us to get those dogs out to Europe, and let's catch up with her now. So welcome, Lottie. I know you've got lots of stories to tell us about, and there's so many questions we've got for you. First of all, can you just tell us about how you got into travel writing, Lottie?
Yeah, of course. So, I mean, I kind of always knew that I wanted to go into journalism of sorts from when I was a, young teenager. And so really everything I did at school and then at university was tailored towards that. And then as before I went to university, I had a gap year and I traveled around with some friends of mine in Southeast Asia and kind of caught the backpacking bug, I suppose. So I decided travel and journalism were probably my 2 favorite things. And so I'd try and combine them. And that's really kind of where it all began. I ended up helping out the Rough Guide to Kenya author on his guidebook update when I was traveling in Kenya during my time at university. I did an internship at Nat Geo Traveler, and then from there I managed to get myself a job at a travel publisher called Rough Guides. And I started travel writing there and was doing what I would call normal travel writing, I suppose, for about 6 years before I started on the dog front, so to speak.
So is that pretty much what you've always done, sort of travel writing?
Yeah, travel writing has been my entire career. I started way back in 2012 and I'm here 12 years later, still at it.
Brilliant. Quite a dream job.
Absolutely.
So how did this connect, this dream job with Arty or traveling with your dog? Is this the first dog that you've gone traveling with?
No, so actually it all began with another Manchester Terrier called Milo, who was my first dog that I got when I was in my kind of mid-20s, living in London and working as a freelance travel writer. My partner at the time and I decided we really desperately wanted a dog, and so we got Milo after several debates about which kind of dog would be best for us. And so we had Milo, and as a travel writer, obviously I was kind of swanning off to all these kind of exotic places. But because I got the dog, I started doing a bit more domestic travel writing. So writing about the UK, I was writing about the Cotswolds and Scotland and places like that. And so I started taking the dog on these trips with me when I was writing stories for the Telegraph or the Times or whatever. I started taking Milo along with me. And just as I was traveling, really quickly realized that there is not enough useful content on the internet for people who are traveling with their dogs. There were blogs after blogs after blogs and Instagram people and all sorts of stuff. But a lot of the stuff that I was finding online, particularly in the non-dog specific publications like the magazines and newspapers, it was all quite vague and it was often quite wrong, I suppose. There were a few inaccuracies and little things like it wouldn't tell you whether or not the dog was allowed down for breakfast, or if you weren't allowed to leave the dog in the room, or if there was going to be an exorbitant charge for bringing your dog along. And I found all of that quite frustrating, that detail just wasn't there. So that's kind of where it all began for me, was essentially traveling with my dog Milo and finding that actually the content out there wasn't serving me. So I thought, I'm going to have to create the content that I want to read.
Yeah, it's quite similar to Steve's story of setting up the dog-friendly website, actually, of going places and finding that you thought they were dog-friendly, but they didn't provide stuff that would be helpful for you and your dog.
Yeah.
Is it your first book then, Dog-Friendly Weekends? Was that your first book?
Yeah, Dog-Friendly Weekends was my first book, and that really was what came from my travels with Milo. That my travels with Milo inspired that book very much so. But it was actually with Arty, my second Manchester Terrier, that I did all of the research. Unfortunately, my first Manchester died very young. He had chronic kidney failure from birth, so we didn't get long together. But long enough for him to make a real impact on my life. And now Arty and I, after that, then spent several months in 2021, I think, traveling around the UK or Britain to do all the research for Dog-Friendly Weekends. And I can now say officially that we have done every single weekend away in that book. So it was all very much vetted by me and my dog.
Oh, that's really good.
Lottie, you must have a couple of favourites at least from the book. Are there a couple that stand out for you?
I always say that Lincoln, I believe, is the UK's most dog-friendly city, because you can take the dog into the cathedral, and I love that you can do that. You can do full tours. You can do I did a 2-hour long tour of the cathedral with my dog, and he only barked once. And I think the other place that really always stands out for me is Northumberland. I really love Northumberland for dogs. The space on the beaches, the castles you can visit. There's amazing walks in the hills, and it's an absolutely stunning part of the coastline, and just not popular enough, really. It doesn't get the love it really deserves.
You mentioned Lincoln as a town. Just to mention, that ties in with our dog-friendly awards that we're going to launch in a couple of weeks' time, where people can vote for their most friendly towns or places to stay or visit. Is there a particular cottage or hotel that you would say stood out amongst the others of a really dog-friendly place?
I think I always go back to East Ruston Cottages in Norfolk, which I'm sure both of you will know about or have probably visited. It's run by a woman called Sue Allen, and she loves dogs, has dogs of her own, and she just really understands how dog owners, how we work, how we think, what we need and what we want for our dogs. And so every single cottage at East Ruston Cottages, which is sort of spread in throughout Norfolk, they have a whole shed full of stuff for your dog. So there's different size crates, there's different there's cooling mats, there's blankets, there's beds of all sizes, and they've even got things like paddling pools that you can fill up in summer when it's hot, which would be ideal on a day like this. So yeah, I think East Ruston Cottages is always for me the go-to when it comes to the dog-friendly standard.
Yeah, that's great. And actually, we're speaking to Sue Allen in a podcast in the future, so you can hear us talk to her soon. You've also written a book after Dog-Friendly Weekends, which is called Dog Days Out. So again, this is for our listeners. This is a book of places to visit with your dog. So it's not so much about staying, it's about places to go for the day. So how did this develop on the back of Dog-Friendly Weekends?
It's a funny story, really. I mean, it wasn't really intentional from me at all. I essentially, the success of Dog Friendly Weekends got the attention of another publisher, and so they came to me and said, "Can you do us one of these, please?" So I was very fortunate that they approached me and they asked me to send some ideas for kind of other titles that could sit within the dog friendly travel space. And between us, we came up with Dog Days Out, which is obviously the title of the book. And it's essentially 365 things to do with your dog across the UK and Ireland. So it's very different to Dog Friendly Weekends in that it covers a much broader spectrum because it's the UK and Ireland and the Channel Islands. So it's a much bigger geographical spread, but it also includes, lots of accommodation. There's lots of beaches. There's lots of recommended walks where I've detailed where you can get directions for them as well, so you don't have to just kind of set off and get lost. And the book really it's all about finding those unusual days out that you didn't expect to be able to have with your dog, be it going to a museum or visiting an aquarium or something like that.
Yeah, which is what we always find is there's the parks and the beaches, which are obvious places, but some sort of museums and castles are really great places to go. You can go now and they really cater for the dogs. So Lottie, is there again, one, if tomorrow somebody was looking for a day out somewhere, and I know it could be anywhere in the UK, or is there somewhere where you say, I'd really try that tomorrow?
There's so many. I think in this book, actually, one of my favorite places was in Ireland. It was in Bunratty Castle and Folk Park, which is Bunratty Castle is an old, I want to say medieval castle, but that might be wrong, but an old castle nonetheless I think it's County Clare in Ireland, and it's not too far from Limerick. And it's essentially, its estate has now become this really amazing collection of historic buildings that have been lifted and transported brick by brick and rebuilt on this estate to kind of as like a time capsule for old-timey Ireland. And it's really, really brilliant. There's old thatched cottages and fishermen's houses and all sorts of old kind of historic buildings. And it's really, really cool. There's often kind of, I don't know, pipers and harp players mooching around and giving it good vibes. And it's a really, really just lovely family day out. And actually, the best part of all is that they have lifted and rebuilt an entire historic pub. And you can go in there and order a pint of Guinness and sit in the pub or sit outside with the dog and enjoy a pint of Guinness from this extremely historic pub.
Does remind me of the Weald Down Museum, actually in Sussex.
Yeah, Weald and Downland. I love that place where they do that's the location for the filming of the repair shop. Yeah, that's it, the repair shop.
Yeah, and again they've reconstructed all the old buildings, and
Mm.
obviously people dress up in past costumes and that sort of thing, but dogs can go on all the buildings. They're very traditional and authentic of what they were like. So
Yeah. There's another one in Cardiff actually as well. Cardiff has St Fagans Museum, so that's another one where they've lifted all of these historic buildings and they've got sweet shops and mills and all sorts at St Fagans as well. And you can often see them doing displays of cooking or using the mill or whatever. It's all very interesting.
brilliant. So 3 recommendations from us all together. So then, latest adventure is Europe. This is obviously quite different.
Yeah.
We're telling some of your stories in Europe through our magazine. I think we've had Portugal and Spain to date, and France. So tell us how you've now telling the story of Arty traveling across into Europe.
Yeah, so this is for our third book, which won't be out for probably at least another year and a half. But our third book is Dog Friendly Europe. So we're currently embarking on the research for that, which is, I mean, I was quite stressed about the whole idea of going to the continent with the dog. I thought it was going to be very stressful. And I have to say, I'm delighted at how easy it all is. Of course, we have the complication of the animal health certificate. Whenever I'm doing anything new with the dog, I get all of this stress and anxiety in me. And I just think, oh God, it's going to be so much more complicated because I'm bringing the dog. And actually, it's just not. Europe is just as dog friendly and in some cases more dog friendly as the UK. And it's such a joy to explore. And it's a whole different dynamic traveling in Europe with a dog. I've traveled in Europe for decades and had lovely times, but traveling with a dog is really different because you are seeing different things and doing different things that you might not ordinarily have done had you not taken the dog with you. And you have different conversations with people, and that's really great.
Lottie, not only first time traveling in Europe with your dog, but you're also traveling in a small caravan. Have you done that before?
So I've had that caravan for about a year before I embarked on that big trip across the continent in it. No, I hadn't really been that far in it. I had been up to Shropshire, I think, in that caravan before I took it all the way across to Spain and Portugal. So it was quite an ambitious trip. And again, I was very stressed about it, the idea of driving this small caravan around the continent with the dog in the back of the car as well. But actually, it was such a joy. It's a really easy caravan to tow. Europe is much better set up for caravanning than the UK is. All of their services have really great sections for caravans to park up easily and pull off easily. And it was all just such a dream. And so we had a really wonderful time in that caravan. We were there for 2 months touring France, Spain, and Portugal. And it was a real joy and just generally very relaxing, actually, surprisingly, considering I was towing this 1-ton caravan behind me. But no, it was brilliant.
Did you have any trouble finding dog-friendly campsites, or do they tend to all be dog-friendly?
They're pretty much, yeah, the continent is very dog friendly, particularly when it comes to camping. The vast majority of campsites were definitely dog friendly. I'm a member of the Caravan and Motorhome Club, actually, who have really, really good dog friendly sites in the UK, and they've got loads in Europe as well. And lots of those sites have dog walks on site, specific areas where you can let your dog off or let them roam on the campsite itself.
So is there a particular highlight from the trip or a country did you feel was particularly more dog friendly than the others, Lottie?
Yeah, I'll tell you two things here because there are two things I want to mention. The first thing that really struck me was how dog friendly France is. France is very, they love their dogs as much as we love ours. And dogs are generally allowed in most restaurants, especially in rural areas, generally allowed inside most restaurants, or if not on a terrace or whatever. So that's been really, really lovely. But the other thing I suppose that really struck me in France was just the variety of different things you can do with your dog in that country. We have vineyards here, of course, but France really has vineyards. They've got serious vineyards. And I spent days touring these vineyards and just having the most wonderful time walking among the vines and tasting the wines and talking to winemakers. And that was really, really exciting. The place in France that really stuck out for me was the Luberon, which is a regional park down in Provence, where you've got this incredible mix of lavender fields, vineyards, ochre quarries and cedar forest. And the ochre quarries are the most striking because they're this bright orange landscape where this ochre, which is this kind of orange mineral that exists within the sand and the rocks, they used to mine it. It was, they were quarrying it for pigmentation. So they used to make dyes and paints with it and things like that. And it's just the most striking landscape. It looks like you're on Mars. And I think there's probably some photos of that in the next edition that I'm in for Dog Friendly magazine because it's such a striking place. And then the other destination that has really struck me, and that was actually a trip that I've just come back from earlier this week, was Italy and how dog friendly Italy is. We took the train to Italy. So I dumped the caravan back at home, had a few weeks at home, and then we trotted off to Italy by train. And so we took the overnight ferry from Harwich to the Hook of Holland, and then essentially trundled our way across the continent to Stuttgart. And at Stuttgart, you can get on a night train, a sleeper train from Stuttgart to Venice with the dog. So we had our own cabin and it was all very civilized. And we woke up at 8 a.m. and we were just pulling into Venice and somebody delivered a coffee to my cabin and it all felt very lovely. And the trip in Italy was really quite eye-opening in terms of dog friendliness. They very rarely blink an eye if you walk into a shop or a restaurant or a bar with a dog. So many of the hotels are dog friendly. And in fact, one of the hotels that we stayed at, it was a friend and I were traveling around with the dog and we'd booked a triple room because they'd only had double rooms. They didn't have twins. So we booked a triple room so we could have our separate beds. And they hadn't put any bedding on the single bed. And so we just asked for them to do it. And they said, "Oh, sorry, we thought that you'd booked a triple room so the dog would have his own bed." And I just thought you would never get that in the UK. In the UK, they would have called me up and said, "Sorry, you've booked a triple room for two people. The dog isn't allowed its own bed, or the dog isn't allowed on the bed or anywhere near any of the furniture, and we don't want to hear it bark, and we don't want to hear this and bark." They were so relaxed about it. They really didn't care.
Yeah, it just feels, from what you've said, it feels very much that dogs are. It would be, why would you bring a dog often, whereas it seems like in France, it's, well, why not? That's quite a revelation. It's really about what's next for Lottie and Arty then. Is there another book? Is there more travels? You going back to Europe?
Yes, so we are still writing this Europe book. So we've still got to hit Belgium and the Netherlands and Germany. So I'll be in Belgium and the Netherlands in July, and then we'll have a little summer break, and then we'll head to Germany probably for about a month in October. So yeah, that's the current plan, and there are plans afoot for further dog-friendly guides, kind of more regional guides in the UK as well. But I can't divulge too much information before those contracts are signed.
I'm sure you're sworn to secrecy.
So, Lottie, in the UK, so often in Dog Friendly, when we talk to members, they tell us that their dogs are conversation starters. So if they're out on holiday or on a walk with their dog, other people, complete strangers, quite often will stop and just talk. Is that the same on the continent?
Oh, definitely. Absolutely. I think for us, I wish I had a pound for every time somebody asked me if my dog was a miniature Doberman, because then I would be a very rich woman and wouldn't have to write these books anymore. But that's the main question we always get asked wherever we are. But I also actually, when I travel in Europe with the dog, he wears a GPS tracker just in case, because at home I've got a whole community of people I can mobilize if he goes missing. But on the continent, I've got no idea how I would, ask locals to help me go and look for my dog. So he wears a GPS tracker and everybody is fascinated by it. It's quite funny how interesting people find it. And I gather they're not particularly popular in Europe because even other dog owners are completely flummoxed by the fact that he's wearing this GPS tracker. But it's a really lovely conversation starter, and it does start a discussion, because people will say, "Oh, why does he wear it?" And I said, "Well, because he's flighty. He likes to run. He likes to chase things, and I don't like running, so I'd rather stand here and check on my phone to see where he is." And then you get into a conversation about his quirky personality, and maybe we talk about their dogs or whatever, and it can just be a really, really lovely way to interact with local people. And I do think there is a different kind of level there as well. And that, we've had interactions with people who don't speak any English, and we've somehow managed to communicate about our dogs or about my dog, because there is this kind of universal understanding, I think, of dogs and their quirks and their value, I think, to society and to us as individual dog owners.
You also mentioned various different forms of transport that you use to go to the continent. So the caravan. You also did the train to Italy.
Yeah.
How did you cross the channel? What routes have you used crossing the channel?
So my favorite route to cross the channel is always the Le Shuttle, the Eurotunnel trains. So you go in the car, on the train, because it's 35 minutes and the dog gets to sit in the car with you. There's no, it's just like being parked up in a car park, really, but the car park's moving. So I do really love the Eurotunnel, but I have to say, I really enjoyed our recent trip to Italy, where we had to take the overnight ferry from Harwich to the Hook of Holland. That was a very, very pleasant way to cross the channel, because you go to bed in your dog-friendly cabin. You go to bed at about 10 p.m. Or whatever, and then you wake up 8 or 10 hours later, and you're on the continent and staring at the Hook of Holland, which is really lovely. And from there, you can hop on trains into Rotterdam and then beyond. So the continent really is your oyster from there. And that's the best way for people without cars, actually. If you don't have a car and you don't drive, getting to Europe with your dog is a faff, to say the least. So you've either got to take that overnight ferry, which does allow you on as a passenger, as a foot passenger. Most of the other ferries don't allow dog owners on as foot passengers. So that is a really good crossing. I do believe the DFDS Newcastle to Amsterdam route also allows foot passengers as well. But then there's also a really clever service called Le Pet Express, which I tested out last year for the Independent. And it's essentially one woman called Brenda with a minibus, and she's got seats down one side of the minibus and she's got cages down the other side of the minibus, and she will drive you and your dog. So you sit in your seat and the dog sits in the cage opposite you, so you're always together. And she will drive you on and off of the Eurotunnel train, and then drop you off at a train station in Calais on the other side. So she picks you up from Folkestone and drops you off in Calais. And then you can go forth on your car-free adventure with your dog there. So there are a few options for car-free, but yeah, they can be a bit of a faff.
What a great idea. And I've been reading in the press the last few months about a number of private airlines that have started up purely to be dog friendly and take so that you can take the dogs with you when you're flying. Have you looked at those at all? Are we going to be reading a book about air flight with dogs?
I have looked at them. I'm in touch with a couple of them. Canine Jets, and I think was the first one, and then Bark Air came along after that. And it's really interesting. They actually started those airlines out of a need for people who are relocating, for work or just for personal reasons. For those people who are relocating to transport their pets over to the destination that they're relocating to, because it's so difficult to fly in and out of the UK if you have a dog. They are not allowed to fly in the cabin at all unless they're an assistance dog. So that was kind of where this was born, I believe. And now it's just become a kind of leisure airline, I suppose, for people who are, shall we say, well-heeled.
It's not that cheap, is it?
It's not. It's going to cost you at least $7,000 each way to get from London to New Jersey. So you have to really love your dog or be desperate to go to the States in order to, but that gets you and your dog together. The dog can sit on your lap or sit on the chair next to you, whatever. It is the real kind of luxury way to travel. And I mean, I would love to test it out. But we have our sights set on Europe right now. And I don't think we need to be hopping over the Atlantic just yet.
Arty, who obviously is your companion through all of this and goes everywhere, he's obviously quite a good traveller. Is the Manchester Terrier known as a breed that is particularly good at travelling, or how did you manage to choose a dog that was a good traveller?
This is a really good question. Arty is a good traveller. He loves being in the car. He's very tolerant of sitting in I have a crash tested crate in the boot of my car because we do so many miles. I just want that extra level of safety. So he's quite happy in his little crate with his fluffy bed. He's an extremely lazy dog, and I think that really helps with them being good at traveling, is the fact that he's lazy. And Manchesters are known quite well to be very lazy. They're a bit like greyhounds and whippets, I gather, in that they will quite happily run for half an hour or an hour in the morning. They'll go for a quick run and then there'll be a spark out for the rest of the day, which is exactly what he's doing right now. He's asleep because it's been such a busy day for him. So I think the laziness certainly helps, but he's also just become used to traveling. We started traveling together when he was 6 months old. So really, for me, it was very much about the socialization, getting him on trains and buses early, getting him in the car early, getting him used to sleeping in different places, foreign places. I remember the first time we spent a first night away together in Northumberland for dog-friendly weekends. And at the time, he slept in a crate at the time. And so I popped him in his crate in the next room, as I would have done at home, and he was quite spooked by that and a bit worried about that, and did do some whining. So we had to kind of work up to him comfortably sleeping in these strange places, but we got there in the end. And now he's quite happy sleeping pretty much anywhere, as long as there's a nice, soft, fluffy bed for him to lie on.
Brilliant. Well, if we do a competition for the most travelled dog, we will let Arty know to enter, because I think he might be, quite a high probability of winning.
I should hope so.
That is absolutely brilliant. And it's been so good to talk to you today, Lottie, and so many stories you could tell us. But is there if somebody wants to read more of your books, find out more about what you do with Arty, is there somewhere you would like to direct people?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you want to buy the books, you can get them on Amazon, Waterstones, all good bookshops, or directly from the publishers, who are Bloomsbury and Bratt Guides. Or you can head to my Instagram, which is just my name, Lottie Gross, and you'll see on there lots of information about where to get the books and other kind of fun little videos of mine and Arty's travels. And
if people want to get snippets of your travels in Europe, it's currently in the Dog Friendly magazine, covering the various countries of Europe with Arty. It's absolutely delightful to have you on today, Lottie. Thank you so much for coming. And it'd be great to speak to you again in the future when you've finished your European trip or potentially going on another journey somewhere.
Excellent. That sounds fabulous. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, Lottie.
Thank you, Lottie. If you'd like to find out more about Dog Friendly, visit our website at www.dogfriendly.co.uk.
The Doggy Podcast with Steve and James.